Welcome to today's episode of Direct Mail Automation School, a podcast for marketers who are looking for an edge as they deploy direct mail and omni-channel marketing campaigns. I'm Dennis Kelly, CEO of Postalytics, the leading direct mail automation platform designed for marketers to deploy automated direct mail and omni-channel marketing campaigns with the speed, integration, and analytics of digital marketing. Today, we have my friend and great guest, Steve Falk, joining us. Steve is the VP of Partnerships and Sustainability at the AIIM Group in Aurora, Ontario, Canada. Steve brings expertise in physical and digital technologies. He and the team at AIIM have integrated triggered variable data printing and direct mail into their clients' tech stacks, which drives improved sales, customer engagement, and charitable donations. Steve's a well-known expert in omnichannel marketing that includes personalized direct mail across both Canada and the U.S. He's also developed a significant body of work to help understand the carbon footprint of direct mail and has developed programs at AIIM that utilize advanced carbon offset techniques. Welcome, Steve. We're psyched to have you join us at the Direct Mail Automation School today.
It's nice to be back at school.
Exactly.
Thanks for the invitation, Dennis.
Well, it's great. So just as a little bit of background, Steve has developed a long career in direct mail and in omnichannel marketing. And we've worked together now for several years, and we're partners up in Canada. And so Postalytics and Steve and his team have a great relationship that is growing like wildfire. So Steve, let's take a step back before we get into the meat of the conversation. And I think the audience loves to hear how marketers have gotten to the place where they have, and they've to understand your background and really how that it's shaped you and where you stand today. And so give us a take on the Steve Falk story and how you got to where you are.
Settle in. But I mean, if you try to summarize it for this audience, I was very lucky. My dad was on the ground floor of Scholastic books when they came to Canada. And, a lot of people are familiar with those books coming to their school. And from a very early age, not only did I have a great source of books, but I got working in the warehouse and systems at Scholastic books, summer jobs and stuff. And I saw direct communication, marketing communications working like they were just masters at it. They talked directly to teachers. They knew their class size, the grade they taught, the language they taught. Then they would market monthly to them with mail. The teachers would send back orders. I mean, this is very early, pre-e-commerce kind of world of transacting directly and very personalized communications. And we just, I probably put my first label on something when I was 14, and understood how you could do it with the computers in those days were enormous, but, we stored 50,000 teachers and students' names and stuff in these computers. And it was not uncommon to print tons of labels and do stuff. I just, from an early age, understood that printing and mailing and communicating in this channel worked really, really well. And when there was long recurring revenue, with a relationship with a teacher and students, it worked wonderfully and made a great business. And so I just absorbed that, went to school, came out of school, and stumbled into communications mostly through academic journals and magazines and things like that, which also database driven. That got me into nonprofit fundraising, which data driven personal communications. It's in Canada, probably in the States, similarly, it probably accounts for 25 to 30% of all personalized mail is nonprofit related. Besides, retail using mail and say healthcare using mail, the nonprofit sector trying to raise money for all these nonprofit organizations, that's a big piece of mail. It really works well. So I got into that.
It's a huge piece of the business.
Yeah. And you're doing, to do it well, you're doing highly personalized segmented mailings where you want to talk to a group based upon the kind of relationship they have. let's say they really like horses versus dogs, and they support a local humane society. If you have the ability to talk directly to that, then you just do better with the relationship. There's an understanding that the organization gets who you are. At a hospital, did you contribute to the cancer or to the children's wing? And without, so we adopted over the years. You just got adopted the best ways to do that, which took me into faster and better kinds of digital printing and faster and better kinds of two-way communications with data. So that's the short trip. The 2-minute bullet is like from scholastic books to highly personalized. Like, can we do 60,000 personalized letters in an hour with full color back and forth with a data stream that came in the morning and mail them, the next morning? Yeah, you can do that now. It's just it's a beautiful thing.
And along the way, you started Prime, right?
Yeah. So along the way, I just had, my wife would say, really an illness to try and run businesses instead of just go work for somebody else. So I couldn't kick that disease, and I kept starting various businesses. And along the way, there was a client who had a little business with 2 or 3 employees in it called Prime Data, and all they did was data processing for direct mail companies. And so I decided that would be a good seed for something. Ideally, they were located just a couple blocks away from where I lived, and they had a good core group of folks working there. And so we grew that to 40, 50 people over a period of 10 years because we took that core group of data competency, and we said, hey, start with the data as a foundation. And then we bought great technology for printing and mailing and the expertise to become good at that. And then also really trying to stay ahead of the curve of like better data exchanges and exchange of print files, et cetera, so that you could be faster. I mean, I think we took days and sometimes weeks out of the process of creating direct mail. So, I think, I remember early meetings in the early days of me assuming that the future was going to be able to be turning around mail quickly, and people shaking their head around me on my team going, this can't happen. It can't happen. And when you get the systems going well and you audit, and, it's overly used, the word automation now, but I was surprised to find in the last year that even Microsoft has automation tools inside Microsoft 365 now. If you go in there and search, you can automate, check this message, move it to this Excel file, copy this, see if it's got any of this, and then email somebody if it does. That's an automation tool built right into 365 now, not a script. But so automating things, making it faster and easier to do things, that made us a market leader, somebody you wanted to have a conversation with. Which eventually led to my curiosity, as you mentioned, about the greenhouse gas emissions of creating mail. And then, last year in July, we became part of this group of companies that are going to be, just becoming better and more effective at that by scaling up those basic principles. Part of the acquisition by Vegevisier and us teaming up with AIIM, who literally was across the street from us, oddly enough. But that's the sort of the last chapter of this story is the AIIM group.
And you've never had to move out of your neighborhood. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking. Yeah, some would say you maybe could have got out in the world a little bit more. I mean, I went to university in a different province, and I traveled quite a bit when I was a kid and learned, did an exchange in Costa Rica to refine my Spanish. But then all the interesting work opportunities all happened within 5 kilometers of my house. For those in the States, that's like 3 miles. I now have to go through one stoplight to get here. And it's slowing down my commute.
That's a tough commute, definitely. No need to work from home for you. It's interesting and I think unusual for somebody that ultimately is in the printing and mailing business to really have started from a data expertise core and moved into the printing and mailing. A lot of times when I talk to print partners, it's kind of the other way. a lot of equipment, and then they say, hey, we need to get some data folks here. And so you
Yeah.
guys took a really different path, I think, than a lot of the traditional print and mail companies. And, that whole notion of applying automation to the data is really something that we at Postalytics have embraced very heavily. Obviously, it's kind of the core of what we do, and I think that's probably why our visions align so well about how communications and omni-channel campaigns are evolving over time.
It was natural that we found each other.
Exactly. And as so much data is now being captured and stored in CRM and marketing automation tools, and the segmentation and everything being used to drive digital campaigns is being applied there. It's just natural to attach direct mail to those data sets and workflows so that it can flourish alongside all the digital channels that are out there.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the only way it can continue to survive. If it's that like it's got to be able to react quickly. It's got to be easier to do than it's been in the past, and connecting through those resources have been kind of built by digital marketers, to reflect that, hey, we want to be able to send out an email more quickly or an SMS message quickly in response to something that's happening in this customer or donor or patient's life. And then it's a matter of, you have your choice of channels. And I mentioned like SMS and email. Well, direct mail is a channel that has very similar kind of features, a send to address, a personalized message that I can send, a timeliness that I can send it out. It's just that they arrive in different mailboxes and have a different amount of impact depending timing wise and everything else. So I don't think that direct mail survives without it. There will be times when you can do mail that isn't attached like that, but the real power, I mean, a simple way to explain it is, I think when it's attached like that, it might even have like 10x power to the other kinds of mail, because and it's some, I can prove it through some of the work we've done. Clients are often reluctant to share exact data, but what you're doing is you're capturing a moment in time. It's like a regular direct mail piece. It might be, hey, every quarter we do a catalog. It's not really capturing a moment of time. It's just capturing a season, right?
Right.
And although that's got a healthy, you've probably got the right season's close in there, and nothing about the particular recipient's frame of mind or position or how the organization relates to that person, and they're saying thanks for being a brand new buyer of LL Bean. That feels good. You got an immediate, and we know that you love hiking, so here's a deal on hiking shoes and poles. Yeah, I mean that all that kind of stuff just becomes so personal and immediate, and that's why I say it has 10x, because the other method that we've been using maybe to make direct mail as powerful it was for decades was more like, hey, let's try and make sure we cover a lot of ground and kind of spray a bunch of messages to a bunch of people and know that a certain percentage of them connect. The newer method is like, this is going to connect with something in a meaningful way at this time because we know something about them. And that's why the power of it.
Exactly. And when merged and combined with other channels, it's even that much more impactful.
That is a given. Like, not a standalone. It always has to have those other channels circulating around it. But it has, if you have the ability to talk directly into their home, put the message in their hands, on top of those other channels, now you've really, really accomplished something that will show in your revenue and your impact, whatever the communication is that you're trying to do.
That's right. There's a compounding effect, the 1 + 1 = 3 type of concept when you're able to bring all of that to the equation. Just let's talk a little bit more about AIIM. And you're in this new platform. It's been a year. Things are settling in. Tell us how the investment and the shift in your platform has helped evolve the services that you're able to provide and the types of clients that you are working with.
Yeah, the group at Vegvizier have experience in understanding the value of mail, such that they're building some best practices, some of the best organizations in North America together to be able to respond to all the things we've just talked about, like very personalized, fast. Let's call it secure. Let's call it personalized. Let's call it like dealing with variations in mail, so that you could like easily deal with, say, multi-location mailings for a chain that had locations across the country, but you had to personalize them up and do it on at scale and at speed. What this often means is it's pretty capital intensive, and so smaller organizations have a hard time getting to the next level. But with the right support, that vision that many of us share, like how do I produce it just faster and better and higher quality and securely, those all require investments. And so just having a person with laser clear vision on where they're going, that helps a lot too, right? So you have a partner who shares your vision for where mail fits into the community. We're basically part of the marketing and communications ecosystem, right? But they share, hey, I understand how mail fits, and we want to help invest in that area to make it successful and capture that success for our clients, right? So I think that's been the key when you start to see that that other people share your vision, like you and I, Dennis, we do. But then when you see somebody who's like, yeah, and we're going to put some money behind this to make this, more possible on all the check boxes you want to do. That's where it's important, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And, as you're talking about mail as this sort of plug-in into the tech stack, it's really, I think, important that those of us who are involved in direct mail tech, omni-channel marketing, are out there kind of telling the story, right? That mail is very much a channel that can work directly in your marketing tech stack. It doesn't have to be this sort of specialty thing off the side that is done by groups of people that have this secret sauce that, only the direct mail people or direct marketers can effectively execute on. That
Yeah.
software enables you to do things at scale without massive investments in people and 50 years of expertise and all the things that are often associated with direct mail in a traditional way.
Yeah, like we had this conversation yesterday, and we were talking about Canadian Bank, and they have a very specific direct mail department, and I would guess that typical of any organization that has a direct mail department, they're seasoned professionals who've been around for a while, who have a print background, and have a very different outlook on how technology plays a role. And it's hard to break into that group. It's so when you say, hey, are we speaking on behalf of this as a technology thing, when we really should be in having conversation, bringing that direct mail group over and having conversations with a technology marketing, like who's the MarTech people, who's sending out SMS messages when XYZ happens, and who's sending the emails, and what are permissions, and what are the security issues, and how do I get into that ecosystem so that they work together. A siloed direct mail organization, the few that even have that still, right? Like who are like, I still invest because catalog departments and stuff have been closing, but they are tough. They're a tough sell, Dennis. I mean, you have to get in there and try and explain why this is different. Their idea of what the value is, they're thinking, oh, I'm going to get a 0.5% response rate and the value is X. And I've explained why I strongly believe some of these triggered pieces are 10X that. And so your budget numbers kind of go upside down because they're like, I don't want to spend a X number of dollars on this and only get a return of Y. And it's like, no, this is a different kind of return when you're doing triggered. it's still, you can call it direct mail if you like, because that's the right term for something that's personalized and going in your house, but it doesn't perform in the same way with the same ROI and response numbers as the old. And it's also working in concert with a number of other things that didn't happen 3, 5, 10 years ago. It's a different world. It's hard to explain. As you said, Dennis, it's the reason we're in school, direct mail automation school today, is to try and like basically share some of this information, that it's a more powerful, different medium when it's working in concert with other digital and it's bolted into the tech stack.
That's right. Couldn't said it better myself, Steve. That's great. And as you are looking at what's transpired here over the last few years, and you know, you're in this new role at AIIM. You're out talking to customers. You know, how are you seeing the evolution of omni-channel marketing playing out? You know, what are some of the changes that you're seeing today, and things that you predict will be happening here in the future?
I think the biggest piece that I think security is one of the biggest items. You know, there was a time, and it still occurs today, where somebody that you're working with says, "I'm going to email you my client list," an unsecured file just in an email, which was absolutely something we did 20 years ago, right? And it's like, well, just send these files back and forth and put them on an unsecured FTP site where you can pick them up, and anyone else can too. But security is bolted down, and I believe it's also it's posing to a bit of an objection / it's gonna cause some friction in adopting these technologies, which even recently there's been attacks against APIs, which were thought to be very secure for a while, right? And like we want this to be a positive thing in the school and talk about how to support it, but really what you want to be also saying is that systems that we're building with security in mind, right? And so that you can kind of get over an organization's objections to so there is a marketing ecosystem of trusted players who are exchanging data to do things, and you have to become serious about it. We wouldn't have thought 20 years ago to get police checks for all of our employees. We wouldn't have thought to have like a special secure shredding system for a document or an envelope, but that's now considered important. And if a document has a name or address on it, whatever, it hits the shredder and it gets shredded before it leaves the building instead of. So I'll just say I would say that's the most significant trend in that's changed and shaped direct mail in the last 5 years. We've done a lot of work on that, continue to do, and it's actually a huge investment. So that investment continues and probably won't change. It's not just firewalls, but it's practices and then compliance for things like HIPAA and SOC 2 and things that you end up starting to consider depending on your clients. But on the other kinds of things is and you mentioned it already, is like the interplay of direct mail with other channels. And, I don't think that this is completely new in the sense that somebody would release, let's use the catalog as an example, but they release the fall catalog. And that would be accompanied by some TV and some radio and, I don't know, some trucks driving around with the word new catalog, look for the new fall catalog, and everyone would be excited because they all thought the fall catalog. It would be supported by a number of channels. But when digital marketing experts came on the scene, let's call it 10, 15 years ago or whatever, and started having whole departments with budgets and stuff like that, that marketplace often worked very independently. They had their own budgets and their own missions, and what was often seen is it was like they were removing, like it was a sum. Do they call it sum zero? Like really what they won, they took away from other departments of marketing, right? So now fewer things were being mailed as catalogs and maybe fewer TV, and there wasn't as much newspaper advertising, and digital was eating it and gobbling it all up. I think now that digital's kind of gotten to its, let's call it, I'm going to call it like the zenith of pure digital play has maybe been reached, because you're not getting much more return for the money you're pouring into it. For every dollar you put in, you don't necessarily get dollars out. You've reached a maximum. That curve of performance is is smoothing out. I never really understood graphs when I was in high school, but I totally understand it now, where you're like, look at the graph and it flattens. It doesn't have that trajectory anymore. It's like, yeah, I can put more and more money in, but it doesn't doesn't give me more revenue out. And I think that now digital is a channel like that. This is a longer way of saying it's now a necessity for them to play with the other channels together, right? Because it can't keep pouring more money into paid search, SEO, placing our ads digitally all over the place. It's not getting the return any longer. And it's just the space is getting more crowded because more players. This is where that digital space is starting to look over their shoulder around and going, what else is on offering? And they're starting to play in the sandbox with the other channels again. I think that's a big change. They're listening. They're saying, hey, I should be knowing what other things are out there. And we should be releasing them in waves and stuff that support each other rather than independently.
Excellent. Steve, one of the things that we've really noticed in your career at Prime and then carried over to AIIM is the work that you've done on this notion of carbon neutral direct mail. And, I think it's exciting, and that you've really been a pioneer in this notion that we can, use offsets to, neutralize the impact of direct mail. So tell us a bit more about, how you arrived at this and the work you've done and how the whole program works.
Well, thanks. It's something I'm kind of proud of, and I've also had a lot of fun working with, because it uncovers some things I was really curious about. As a lifetime member of the print community, having print advertising and book and magazine business, we've used a lot of wood and a lot of trees, and we've lived through concerns about recyclability of paper, and then Forestry Standard Council, where is the origin of the paper and what was the forestry practices. And in the last few years, when people have been more and more concerned about greenhouse gas emissions, I had no idea. We knew what to do with FSC, and we knew recycled percentage paper could be 60%, but I was so curious. You could Google, how many emissions my car took if I drove to work, and but like the whole life cycle of printing and stuff, it was a mystery. And you and I both, Dennis, love the outdoors, right? One of our favorite things is to stand on a river and enjoy, fly fishing on a river with wilderness around us and everything. So there's, it's a conflict to not know your impact on the environment when it's your whole business and career. And eventually I met a young man who was hired by municipalities. He was a university student who was hired by municipalities to do these carbon inventories, which was starting, as people started doing this as part of their carbon impact assessments, organizations were realizing that part of their board's directive or the municipality's directive was to understand the environmental impacts. So over a family dinner, this young guy explained to me how he did it for a town. And I said, I think you can do that for my business. So I hired him on a contract to come and do a research project. And we worked on what's called Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions, which is Scope 1. Scope 2 is like our plant. And Scope 1 and 3 are kind of like upstream and downstream of your facility. So we did a survey of everybody who commuted to work. We looked at our utility bills and what it cost to heat and to air condition our facility, and whether or not there were chemicals coming in and out, and things like VOCs, which we had gotten rid of all of our presses that emitted a lot of VOCs and that kind of thing. In the end, we were able to do an assessment of our building pretty quickly, and then we looked at what was coming into us, which is largely paper, really heavy products. And it turns out that some of the paper companies had done some heavy lifting for us already. So if you inquire and use the most popular paper brands made in North America, then many of them are already promoting that we've done the greenhouse gas study. So if you buy a ton of paper X, they'll tell you there's so many tons of emissions for this ton of paper. So we knew how many tons of paper we needed to create 1 million pieces of mail, let's say, and we knew how many millions of pieces of mail we were creating a year in our plant. We typically using these couple of types of paper. Okay, well, then it was downstream, and the post office was a big mystery to us, but turns out post offices around the world had been trying to get a grip of this. So Canada Post, as many as 4 years ago, had already started in their annual report doing an emissions of CO2 report. So we were able to take that report, divide it by the number of parcels and mail pieces, averaging the weight out for each of those things, having conversations with the post office about what do you think about our methodology for this. They couldn't really disagree because nobody's really tried it before. And we had, after it was all put into a bowl, a report. And you can see that report by going to AIIM.com, AIIM.com, or look up carbon neutral direct mail. It's probably one of the things you'll find in Google because there's not that many people talking about carbon neutral direct mail. And that's the basis of it. We now knew that a piece of mail would have X amount of carbon emitted based upon this methodology. We're not saying it's the final story on it, but up to that point, nobody had any story. And I guess I can let a couple of interesting things here that might encourage you to do this research yourself, or maybe in your own sector or whatever. But one of the things we found is that the emissions were actually roughly 10 times the weight of the mail piece. So if you had a 20-gram mail piece or a 1-ounce mail piece, the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that were emitted from the tree to the paper mill to delivering the paper to us, for us doing it in our shop, delivering it to Canada Post to get it to the home, was the emissions weighed 10 times the mail piece. Wow. 10 ounces if it was a 1-ounce mail piece. And a ton of greenhouse gas emissions is roughly a giant balloon the size of up to the 10-yard line in a football field. It's 10 yards across, 10 yards high balloon. That's a ton. And it only takes 5,000 pieces of mail of a typical letter in an envelope to make a ton of that. So for every 5,000 pieces you do in a day, you are part of a life cycle of that balloon going up. Now, Canada Post is responsible, or the Postal Service is responsible for some of it. We are for some of it, and the trees and manufacturing. But we started saying, you know what? If our clients wanted, we'll just buy this. And for a while, we just did it for everybody. And now we have an opt-in program. And so if you want to offset this, you may have your own offset program. If you're a bank or a credit union, you may have some offset. But you can use offset credits that we have. There's a lot of controversy about offset credits right now. Understandably, it's a bit of an unregulated industry. We use some in Canada that are nature-based offset credits, and we understand the whole system's in a bit of flux. It's moving around, but we felt like we had to do something once we understood, and this was an opportunity for us to say, hey, you can't understand it, you can do something about it, and you don't have to have your head in the sand. That's the story of it. And it's a continuing saga. I don't know where it'll be in 5 years or 10 years, but there are opportunities right now to understand something about the emissions of direct mail and to do something about it.
Well, that's tremendous. It sounds like, as you said, that this is still an evolving area that is growing in importance and growing in everybody's consciousness as well. And so it's tremendous work that you've done. We thank you. And, I think it's really pioneering in this space. So,
well, thank you. It's been a great team effort here. And, down in the USPS, they made almost a historic decision in the last year. I was speaking at Mailcom, and I had the opportunity to talk to some of the people at USPS and congratulate them on the decision to buy electric vehicles instead of gas burning vehicles, because those vehicles last 10 or 20, 30 years sometimes delivering mail. And there's one thing I learned about this project is if you're moving heavy things long distances, you're emitting, CO2, carbon emissions come from that in the current world. And every time you can change to an electric vehicle that is being powered not by coal, but from solar or renewable, sustainable resource rather than a carbon-based one, you're taking carbon out of that system of delivering heavy things long distances. And as long as those vehicles that the USPS are using are recharged by solar, wind, hydro, nuclear, something that isn't carbon, you're a net benefit for every piece of that heavy mail that gets delivered. And that will continue for anybody who's replacing carbon burning vehicles. Heavy things moving long distances, that's the number one contributing factor next to your keeping your house warm and cold.
Yeah. Well, I think I had the opportunity to check out these new vehicles at the National Postal Forum in May down in Charlotte. They're tremendous. They're a tremendous advance both for the postal delivery worker, ergonomically and structurally. They're big upgrades on what exists today. And then, to your point, the ability to take these trucks out during the day, bring them back to a lot, charge them, and have them ready to go in the morning is so important. I was talking to some of the folks, and they were saying some of the biggest challenges is actually getting the right charging infrastructure to some of these older facilities. Because you can imagine that's a lot of electricity if you've got 30 or 40 trucks going out, right? You've got to have a tremendous amount of infrastructure in place in order to support that. And so it is a bit of an evolution, but they're certainly on the right path. And the other major reorganization of the USPS warehousing and distribution facility work that is now started will cut down on the number of truck miles per letter significantly as well. So there's a lot of movement in the right direction there at the USPS and at Canada Post. And so thank you for taking a leadership role on this, and you're really helping the industry gain a better understanding of the impact and what can be done. So
I appreciate the shout out. And there is an organization called the Sustainable Mail Group for Canadian listeners. It's a nonprofit that was started by paper companies, printers, organizations like ourselves about a year and a half ago. It's associated to the National Association of Major Mail Users, and this group is dedicated to having kind of quarterly webinars and the like, where you'll be able to learn more about this. And there's also organizations in there who are trying to share best practices and the most current information, because it's an evolving, brand new sector. So look up the Sustainable Mail Group if you're wanting to join their LinkedIn group, or just follow them, or actually join the organization itself.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I'm going to join that group as well. So tremendous. Well, Steve, it's been great having you on today. Always interesting and fascinating conversations we have. Excited to continue to build our partnership with Postalytics up in Canada, with you and with AIIM. And as a last bit, tell our listeners how to get in touch with you to talk about what's going on with AIIM and carbon neutral direct mail, or any of the other things that we discussed today.
Well, you can reach out, hopefully maybe at the bottom of the video, put sfalk@AIIM.com. That's SFALK@AIIM.com. Just look up our website, AIIM.com. You'll hit the contact us. You might even hit the chat button. It'll go to my phone and I can chat with you at AIIM.com.
Awesome. Well, Steve Falk, the AIIM Group, thank you again so much. It's been great having you on. Thank you, everybody, for today's episode of Direct Mail Automation School. We'll look forward to speaking again very soon.
Thanks, Dennis. Thanks for your interest and curiosity and support. Cheers. Have a good day.